All right. I think with that, we'll get underway. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in this webinar today. The webinar is actually being recorded, so we will make it available as a download for anyone who may have missed out today. And for if someone wants to watch it again, feel free to do so. We'll make the link available to you as well. I hope everyone can see my screen. We'll be talking today about research that Grosvenor has published early this year about what finance can and should expect of procurement. I've also updated just over the last week a couple of slides to also talk about the impact of COVID on this topic. So I will share that with you today as well. So let's, there's still one person coming in, two actually. Okay, there we go. What you have in front of you is all of the controls of Zoom. Feel free to use them. I'm sure most of you are now more familiar than ever with how video conferencing and webinars work. There is a chat box that you can use to type in any questions that you may have. It is just in your control panel here at the bottom. It has 3 dots and in a speech bubble. So please make sure to use that if you have any questions. Very happy for anyone who feels comfortable to unmute themselves and ask a question in person to also do that. That is obviously more than encouraged, and having a bit more of a feedback from the audience and getting a bit more questions to make it more interactive rather than just me talking at you, that would be appreciated. But I do know that the hurdle to do so is sometimes a bit higher, so that's why feel free to use the group chat. So again, welcome to the webinar today. My name is Stefan Gassner. I'm a director at Grosvenor Procurement Advisory. Please do feel free also to connect with me on LinkedIn if you aren't connected already to me. We do share insights like this research that we've done and talk about today readily on LinkedIn. So if you connect on LinkedIn, you make sure that you're not missing out on any of those those sorts of posts that we're sharing with you. For those of you who don't know Grosvenor, we are a specialist procurement consultancy. We're focusing on 3 areas and work with procurement teams from the public sector and the private sector to improve the way that they operate their business, that they operate their procurement functions in specific, but also help them with getting more value out of their current supply base and increasing that supply base by running procurement events for them as well. We do this for a whole raft of different clients, as I just said, from all different kinds of sectors, universities, utilities, public sector, and large private sector organizations as well. Here are just a few of the happy clients that we've served over the past 25 years. Now, with that, let's get into the research that we've published early this year together with Michael Page. This is available from our website for download. It's an ebook that you can download. I'll have the link shared with you as well. It's for free. We've spoken to 91 organizations from right across Australia, and we wanted to explore the question of what is it that finance actually does expect of procurement, and then conversely also, how does that actually match up with what procurement is currently doing. So from those 91 organizations, there were 42 respondents that are a procurement person and 38 from finance, 17 CPOs and 31 CFOs within that cohort. So that's quite a senior cohort that we've interviewed there. Again, a good spread of different sectors and industries that we've experienced here. So 21% are from government, 14% from healthcare, and 14% from manufacturing. So a good spread across the Australian economy. The first question that we asked was, but when you think about procurement's vision and strategy and all the policies that we've got in place as procurement people, how aligned are those actually with those of the overall objectives of the overall organization? So is procurement just doing its own thing? Do we have our own vision, our own strategy, or are we actually tying it in with what the objective of the overall organization is? the overwhelming majority answered that the answer to that is actually no. So procurement's vision and strategy only somewhat aligns with that of the overall organization. 50% of procurement people said that. And asked the finance people the same question, 2 in 3 actually come back and say, well, actually, no, we're only at best somewhat aligned. And that's quite stunning, because this is something that you've read about in the last 5 to 10 years and over again, how important it is to align functional strategy with overall business strategy. It's something that we still have not quite worked out how to do. And all too often, procurement is still operating in what seems to be a silo. So really, what's wrong? Now, this slide here is probably a bit much to take on at first. We've asked the respondents, what are the different focus areas for procurement? And we've listed those here. So it starts from improving the way we operate as a business, increasing the organization's ability to innovate, and then enhancing the value we deliver to our external customers, and so on. By now, you've probably read the rest of the list as well. So those are the areas that procurement could potentially focus on. And then we ask the respondents, where should the focus actually be of the procurement team? So that's the green columns here. And then we got the orange columns of where the focus actually is. And you see there is quite a disconnect here, right? So 29% of the respondents to this study said the single focus of the procurement team should be on improving the way that we operate as a business, followed by the ability to innovate, and then delivering increased value to external customers. You'll see that reducing supply risk, for example, is only 4%. And I just want to say that with view of, we'll see later on how this may have changed. It is really from the data was collected in September and October of 2019. So some of this has obviously changed. Now, where the focus is currently is exactly not where it should be. So you see that most organizations actually focus on, sorry, I'll just admit one extra person. All right, fantastic. So most organizations actually focus on reducing cost. Most procurement teams still focus on reducing cost. I thought we were way past that in 2020, but it's still, for 47% of the procurement functions, the single most important area to focus on. 13% work on improving the way we operate as a business, and reducing risk as a whole, supply risk as well as all of the other risk, is still for 22% as well. You know, increasing ability to innovate, only 2% of organizations actually focus on there, but 22% should focus on that. Sorry, there was just one clarifying question in the chat, which was from Jason, whether those responses are across all respondents or finance people only. These are across all respondents. So all of the respondents have rated this. How it differs between procurement and finance, I'll go into in a moment. All right, with this, let's have a look at some comments that people have made about procurement. This is a C-suite person, and they were saying procurement neither has advocates in our organization, nor is it valued. This CFO here said some decisions are not made in the best interest of the organization. Again, seeing that connect to what we had said on the first slide, that the strategy of the procurement team doesn't always align with that of the overall organization. But for me, this quote here is really the one that sums up what we have found in this research. It is the recognition that creating value is not just about reducing cost. It is all about that there also needs to be a shift so that the procurement function is focused on the whole of the business objectives and not just the lowest cost purchase. It's really quick to read over what I think is actually important to take out here. So it says, it is not just about reducing cost. So that means it is also about reducing cost, but not only, right? So it's about long-term value creation, but also about reducing cost. And I think obviously in this climate, in the next couple of months and years, that cost reduction will obviously pop up time and again, and probably more so than we thought it would at the end of last year. So this is now contrasting what the finance people expect of procurement and with what procurement expects of procurement. So I've grayed out those areas where there's commonality, right? But what finance expects of procurement is their cost reduction as well as the other things. What procurement expects of procurement, you see, cost reduction is not there, right? It's for them, it's for us, it's more about improving the value to external customers as well. And with this transition into a post-COVID world, I actually think this is very, very important to keep in mind, that finance requires procurement to keep an eye on cost, but also deliver the long-term value. If there's any other questions of anyone, please feel free to post them using the chat module. You access that through the Zoom menu, just where the speech bubble with the 3 dots is. Type in whatever you would like there, and I'm very happy to answer your questions. All right, I know there's a couple of people here today from the public sector, and because that was the biggest cohort in our sample here as well, about every 5th respondent was from the public sector, we've broken it down a bit further just to see how the alignment is within the public sector. And you see, public sector, where the focus should be, is a tiny bit different to the overall cohort of respondents. But again, improving the way that we operate as a business is the single most important one, or should be the single most important one. But very closely followed by an agenda of increasing social and sustainability outcomes through procurement. That has not featured in the overall cohort as strongly as it does within the public sector. The enhancing the value to external customers, again, is similar in the overall cohort to this public sector cohort. So that's where the focus should be. But now look at the bottom of this. Reducing cost, reducing risk. That's where the focus currently actually is. And when you then see that there is no green bar in those 3 last items, that's quite telling, isn't it? So as public sector procurement functions, we typically focus on reducing risk. 42% of overall respondents said they're focusing on risk reduction, and then followed by cost reduction. But what we should actually be doing is improving the way we operate as a business and deliver better sustainability outcomes. Look at those sustainability outcomes. Focus should be, say, 21%, but only 4% of procurement teams currently focus on that. All of the tra-ra that we're hearing on social media and on conferences and in webinars about how important social and sustainability commitments are, and I completely agree that they are, but it's just not quite making it into BAU yet. And it's going to be very interesting to see how that might change throughout this COVID upheaval. Well, while we talk about COVID upheaval, what have we found? So over the last 2 weeks, we've gone back to the original respondents from this and asked some additional organizations as well. How has COVID actually impacted your procurement team, and how is it possibly changing some of those objectives that we have seen? So this is now a sample of 50 organizations. And what you see that they said, this is now really procurement's time to shine, right? Never waste a good crisis. I think for procurement, this is absolutely a time where we can show the best and really contribute to the business. So for 33% of the respondents, procurement has become critical to the success of the business. And for more than 1 in 2, procurement has become more positive in its impact on the business. Only very few procurement teams say that not much has changed or that procurement has become less important. So I think that's a very clear takeaway, that procurement in times of crisis is a very important function for the overall business. Okay, so same chart as before, same items as before, but you see that the bars that are here are quite different. So when the focus in 2019 was on cost reduction, value to external customers, improving the way we operate as a business, so this is the actual focus, right? Not the desired focus, but the actual focus. It has completely shifted. And in April 2020, reducing supply risk is, for 4 out of 10 organizations, the most important function that procurement can provide right now. And for 15%, it is cost reduction. So supply risk reduction and cost reduction are really top of mind. Probably not telling you anything new because that's what you're seeing in the organization right at the moment as well. The interesting part here is to keep in mind that this will shift again. So very understandably that in April 2020, we're actually sort of in crisis response mode and just making sure that we get through the next month or two. But very soon we'll see that this changes again. We'll repeat this exercise, this research, in August and in December, just to see how it keeps on working. I would assume that the cost reduction will overtake supply risk reduction again. After the supply risks have initially been mitigated, and we'll see that life goes on, and we probably found alternative sources if we needed to, the cost reduction will overtake to ensure the long-term viability of the organizations again. So that, I want to keep a close eye on that, and obviously you will as well. So, but keep in mind that we need to not be too late in changing that mode, right? When it's not enough to just look at supply risk, but also then look again at that longer term value and also a cost reduction. Again, very happy to take any sort of comments on here. What I will also do after this webinar is share with you the link to the survey that is COVID specific, because that is still open until the end of this week. So if you would like to contribute, I'd rather have a bigger sample than just 49 teams. So if you can get that to 70 or 80, that would be absolutely phenomenal. So it only will take you 2 or 3 minutes to respond to. I will make the link available after this, and you'll get the updated results then afterwards, obviously, as well. Very good. So there's the second part of the original study. So we're now back to what we published earlier this year. Looked at what we can actually learn about the maturity of procurement in Australia and how that may impact what the focus of the procurement teams actually is or should be. And when we talk about maturity, we are working to this 5-level model that I'm displaying here. So 5 levels goes from foundational level via emerging, established, to strategically executed and fully integrated. Just because some of these levels are more at the right-hand side doesn't necessarily mean that they are better, right? So I would not say that every organization has to become at least strategically executed or fully integrated in its procurement maturity. I would argue that every organization has its ideal point on this curve, but it does not need to be right at the right-hand side. So for a lot of organizations, getting to a 3, so market expertise, or a 2.5 early involvement, that's absolutely fine. When we set up a procurement function, it's all about having a fit-for-purpose procurement function, not a gold-plated one, which is exactly what we're trying to do when we run procurements, right? It's a value for money thought. So when we normally work with organizations in the strategic executed or fully integrated space, it's typically those that have procurement / logistics / supply chain as their core business. So it's the fast moving consumer goods, for example, or the pharmaceutical companies. So we asked our 90 participants, where do you actually sit here? And probably not much to our surprise. It ranges a fair bit, but most organizations actually sit in the emerging and in the established levels. So between servant and market expertise, 40% of the overall organization said they sit in emerging and 28% in established. What each one of those levels actually means is explained in the ebook. So feel free to download that and read up on it if you're interested, or just ask a question. So this actually is quite common with the most organizations who we work with. So most organizations in Australia that we work with are between servant and market expertise, and we're quite often working with them to get them up that maturity curve from probably servant to sort of early involvement or market expertise, and that typically takes sort of 18 to 24 months. Yeah, that's where the organizations typically sit. Now, again, I wanted to know whether this perception of majority differs between finance and procurement people. And we found, yes, very much so. So the blue bubbles on this slide are finance respondents, and the green bubbles are procurement respondents. And you see completely, at every single level, procurement says we have a higher maturity than what finance is. So finance, the majority of organizations see their procurement function in the emerging space, whereas most procurement teams see themselves in the established space. So that's interesting, isn't it? There's obviously a couple of reasons. It doesn't necessarily need to mean that the maturity is actually different, but at least it's the communication. So you could say that it's finance just doesn't understand what procurement does, and therefore doesn't understand its contribution, its value, and also not its maturity. That's something I hear very often. You can also see it from the other side and say, well, procurement is just not able to demonstrate to finance what the actual value and maturity is. So I think it's on us to sing our praises, and in like a crisis like this, demonstrate that it is quite with some merit that procurement's importance in this crisis is heightened versus normal business as usual. So I think everyone has now sort of automatically already asked themselves, where do you think you sit? So as an organization, where do you think that you sit on this maturity curve? I think is quite a valid question. So if you think that you're more in the lower maturity side of things, then you're probably in the first two levels. And that really means that there's a low alignment between the expectations of procurement and reality. So we found that 81% of low maturity organizations, that alignment between the vision, the strategy, and the policies of procurement do not align with those of the overall company or organization. So that's quite a clear feature that we saw a clear correlation between a low maturity of the procurement function and that poor alignment between procurement's strategy and that of the overall organization. Those low maturity teams often struggle with being bogged down in firefighting, not being involved early enough, and not having the right people capabilities. 55% of those low maturity organizations have cost reduction as their main focus, but only 12% say that that is actually where the primary focus should be. In order to move up further in the maturity curve for those organizations, it is actually important to have a better customer orientation, that internal and the external customer should be more of a focus rather than cost reduction. It's easier said than done, but if you are able to work more closely with your customers and respond to their needs, that will create trust. And if you get to prove your sense worth and you earn the trust, what that will actually mean is that you're going to get involved more early in the procurement projects. If you are able to demonstrate value, everyone is going to knock on your door. And that's exactly what you want. And getting involved early means less firefighting. So it's actually addressing two of those biggest hurdles at the same time. All right. If you are a high maturity procurement function, the picture looks quite different. So for those organizations that have a highly mature procurement organization, we found that 61% of those organizations, that there is a strong alignment between procurement's goals and those of the overall organization. So exactly the opposite from the low maturity. If you are a highly mature procurement organization, that alignment exists and you're not operating in a silo. Not a single respondent said that the procurement and the company strategy do not align for those highly mature procurement teams. But even when you're one of those front runners, there's still things that we struggle with. And I think this will resonate with quite a few of you on the line today. So we're still getting involved too late. We do not have access to the right technologies and systems, and we do not have the right people capability. So what is the focus of the more mature procurement functions? It should solely, well, not solely, but it should be clearly on business improvement. Only 16% currently have that as their focus, but 31% said that should be the focus. And again, should be less on cost reduction, 37 currently, and it should only be 4%. What's more important for those highly mature procurement teams is also supplier-led innovation. So this is more important here than for the overall cohort that we surveyed. All right, very good. So now we're almost through it all. I just now want to give you a summary, and then I'm more than happy to take your questions. In preparation for that, I'm not sure if you're going to get any questions, but I hope we do. Please use the chat function in the Zoom controls. It is the little speech bubble with the 3 dots to ask any question. Will then also allow you to unmute yourself after this, and if someone is brave enough to ask a question, I would very highly be happy about that. Okay, so all right, let's move on to the summary. So this is what finance shouldn't expect of procurement in 2020. So firstly, finance should expect that there's a clear alignment between procurement's vision, strategy, and policies with that of the overall company. We have seen through this research that that is actually not a given, because for 1 in 2 organizations, that alignment doesn't exist yet. Secondly, procurement should focus on long-term value creation for the internal stakeholders and external customers, instead of just on short-term cost reduction and risk mitigation. And we saw that this is especially the case in the public sector. There, it's not about cost reduction and risk mitigation. More and more, it'll be important to deliver sustainable outcomes and social outcomes through our procurements. Overall, we want to improve more the way that the organization operates. This was the same across all of the cohorts, across all of the industries. Procurement's biggest contribution to the business is around improving the way that the business operates. We are a change agent that works across the whole business, much more so than any other function, and we need to use that position to drive positive change and positive impact. If we are able, thirdly, to conduct our business in a more planned and deliberate way, so that means we're moving up the maturity curve, then that will help us increase trust with our stakeholders, which will allow us to get involved in projects earlier, which then in turn will mean that some of our challenges that we still have, even as a mature procurement function, will go away, which were mainly around not getting involved early enough and still doing too much firefighting. All right, very good. So here is the link to download the ebook from our website. As I said, it's free for you to do so. We will send around this link to all of you as well. And also we will send around after this the survey for the COVID-19 specifics, just to understand what may have changed as compared to when we did the original study. Very good. Okay, so now it's question time. And I've got one question here from Samantha. Thank you for asking a question. And again, everyone else, please do so as well. Why did we choose finance and not the broader business? Very good question. We found that there is always a bit of a banter going on and a bit of a discussion between finance and procurement. Quite often, procurement reports into finance, and that leads to some friction. Procurement professionals at various conferences and so on would quite openly say, finance just doesn't get us. And finance would say, procurement just doesn't do what they need to. And we wanted to put a bit more evidence behind some of those things and to give finance, but also procurement, some tools and insights on how they can improve, so that that gap between what the expectation is and what the reality is to help bridge that gap, essentially. So that's why we chosen finance. We could have chosen IT as well. We could have chosen HR, but yeah, for now it was because there's quite often that that reporting relationship between the two functions. All right, very good. Did anyone have another question?
Can I comment on that?
Oh, yes, please, Samantha, do that.
So I think it's quite important because I guess the budgeting ties in from a finance perspective. So I think it is important that finance understand what we're trying to achieve, but often that would drive just the cost reduction remit of our mandates and not the broader strategic objectives. And I think for me, coming from an environment where currently it's very decentralized, finance is one of many stakeholders that I would be trying to get on board. And I interestingly do have our objectives, procurement's objectives and the business objectives closely aligned, but I think it's more around the relationship side of things, as you mentioned, where more work is needed. And that would be broadly speaking across all of the business. And that's purely because my model is decentralized, right? Whereas in other organizations, perhaps if procurement reports into finance, I would understand the connection more closely.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. I actually think also there's a clear explanation of why what we're doing as procurement teams currently is so focused on cost reduction. Quite often it is because there is that reporting relationship that our KPIs are actually set around cost reduction. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg, right? It seems like the targets that we're measured against, and even the position descriptions, right, that we're hired against, quite often do not take that overall improvement of the business as an important objective. It's more around cost reduction, right? So, of course, we're doing what we're being incentivized to do rather than probably what everyone would expect us to do. So there is a bit of a chicken and egg there as well. But yeah, look, very much so, I would agree with you. It's all about the relationships that will allow us to move up through that maturity curve. You know, those organizations that are not in the lower maturity levels, they do have those strong relationships right across the business, have the trust of those stakeholders to get involved early. And they do have that trust because they bring something to the table. The rest of the business knows that procurement can improve the way that we operate and you know, have insights and something to contribute, and therefore involve us early on. Thank you very much. That's great. Anyone else who's got the guts to unmute themselves, Nicola?
I just wanted to maybe clarify something there, because finance is, as has been said very often, procurement sits under finance. Finance has this view that reduced costs should still be a very important part of what procurement does. And it seems procurement is trying to fight back and say, no, I think we should do more of that. I think what it reflects also is the other customers of procurement. And rather than pitching finance versus procurement, it would be very interesting to pitch finance versus operation versus marketing versus HR, and to actually listen, for finance to listen to the other stakeholders, what they expect procurement to do, rather than letting it like come upstream from the procurement team to try to explain to their own boss, you know, that's what I should be doing, but really have this cross discussion from the top lines of the business.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you very much. I think there's also in that we could gain some insights on, you know, how is it that IT is able to sell their services to the rest of the business? How is it that HR is being able to do that? What is it that we can learn? What is it that procurement can learn from HR? What is it that we can learn from IT that, you know, generates that buy-in? So yeah, that's actually a great suggestion. Any other questions? Again, please use the group chat or just unmute yourself. Is there someone else?
Yes, Stefan, sorry, can I say something else? Sorry, just when I was looking at your COVID findings and obviously how the focus on risk has shifted, I think the reason that reduction of costs is going to start moving up again is because of the pressures on business as a result of the financial impact of the crisis. So whereas before they might be expecting us to contribute or might have been expecting us to contribute operationally. I think going forward, we're going to play a key role in trying to help businesses maintain their profitability because of the impact of COVID. So it's, I mean, it is, whilst it might have been something that is on the radar for a lot of people, it will become more important for us to contribute to those discussions, to contribute to the financial agenda of the company going forward.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you. So I do think that whatever we have seen from last year's responses, that sort of will again play a role. So I think that is sort of the over the long term, we'll have to work towards those expectations again. In the short term, first of all, it was just supply risk mitigation, and then agree with you, the biggest contribution will be from keeping the organization profitable, and then we're moving back into the field of those longer term sort of underlying expectations. Thank you for that, Samantha. Here's another question that someone posted. HR is generally, HR also generally feels underappreciated and have some problems selling themselves as procurement. At least we have hard financial outcomes to relate to. That's absolutely right. So we are actually measuring the impact of procurement on the overall organization. It's not as hard as it is for the rest of the business. It's still not easy. But at least we can clearly point to dollar figures, and I would not underestimate that ability to do so, especially in this crisis mode. I work closely with marketing teams as well. They're the first ones to go because they can't clearly demonstrate how at the bottom line they're contributing. And it's for procurement, it's exactly the opposite. So it should be rather, we should be in a rather good position over the next 6 to 12 months to show our money's worth to the business, quite literally. All right, excellent. Was there any other questions or comments that someone would have and want to make? All right. Well, thank you very much. We'll leave it at that. Again, feel free to connect on LinkedIn, to reach out to me using the contact details here. Always happy to have a chat and spinball some ideas about how we can improve your procurement function, how we can help you out, get through the hump of all of the additional work that is there at the moment. And please do participate in the COVID survey and also download our ebook. We'll upload this webinar as well in case you want to forward it to someone else. That'd also be very much appreciated. Well, thank you very much from the team at Grosvenor here, to all of the participants today across Australia and New Zealand. And I wish you a good day and please stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Stefan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.